Right. Well, yeah, as you said, Ryan, ACL, the round of 16 is coming up. But I think let's start with some breaking news that happened on Sunday. Daegu
Hmm.
FC boss Gamma stepped down. He said he takes responsibility for the results and quits because he hasn't been able to deliver the results that fans expected. What are your
Hmm.
thoughts on that? Were you surprised by his resignation?
It's very interesting being in Thailand when that resignation came in. Obviously, he has a lot of history here, and I was with a couple of folks at Port FC's home opener and just chatting about Thai football, Asian football in general. And so Gama resigning with Daegu, I mean, it makes sense. The results aren't there. It's really bad timing. I mean, it's days away from them resuming an ACL, where obviously he managed them well enough to get out of that group, to win that group. Um, so it's a bit surprising there. As far as overall the cynical side, or I guess again just being here in Thailand, Port could probably use a new manager for sure. Chiang Rai United could use a manager. And these are teams that have ACL experience. He's very experienced here in Thailand. He's a known name. And for folks that love Asian football, they'll know Madame Pang. She is the owner of Port, so she might be looking to get a big name in. So there might be a little bit more to this than just the results. I don't know. That's why I said it's interesting being here. I don't know if being here is what's playing that into my mind or if that's actually a part of it. But the timing is very, very strange. But yeah, Daegu, they just haven't been playing up to as well as they should. So you would expect a manager to get the axe. I just thought that why not have him finish out what he started in ACL? I mean, we're talking about literally a week or 2 weeks difference. I mean, but maybe they'll get that new manager bump in ACL. We've seen it before. We've seen it with other teams. So I don't
Yeah.
know, but it's strange timing.
Yeah, it is. It is very, very strange. It's I don't know. You could say it's selfish, maybe, to do it this close to an ACL round of 16 match. But yeah, we'll have to see whether that manager bounce happens or not. I mean, they've got a
Mhm.
big game against John because we'll get to in a little bit. But very, very interesting timing. I wasn't expecting it personally. I know the results haven't
Mhm.
been great, but I think we're just kind of used. I know he's not a Korean manager, but we are used to managers here digging their heels in sometimes and not
Yeah,
leaving perhaps when they perhaps ought to. So that maybe that was part of it for me. But some
for
other
sure.
news that broke fairly recently, or there was an announcement from K League that said that they will be looking into revising the foreign player quota rules from the current 3+1+1 to the 5+1, which would then be
Mhm.
more in line with the AFC, what they have in mind. Now, when will these new rules in AFC come into place? Is that going to come in from next year?
Yeah, that's going to come in with the newly revamped 23-24 version of AFC competitions. So that'll be in place when ACL resets in almost exactly a year's time, actually, because the group stage is going to be kicking off next August. So soak up this ACL while you got it, folks, because it's going to be a long break for the East afterwards, because it won't resume until February. And then after that, group stage isn't until August. And that's when these roster rules will come into place. And I like it for ACL. I like it for K League as well. I think when you look at the top leagues in the world, there aren't as many roster restrictions as we have in K League. So the 3+1+1, I think it was a very good initiative. I really liked that idea. But I think it's even better to just have 5+1 and make that really nice and easy. And hopefully it encourages teams to go out and get players from the region as well.
Yeah, I mean we'll have to go into this in a lot more detail another time, but I think that K League teams are going to have to do this to keep up with the other teams in ACL, otherwise they're going
Yes.
to get left behind. That's just the way it's going to be. But I do worry about domestically the disparity between the big teams and the small teams is only going to get
Mm-hmm.
even wider. You're going to get teams like John Book and Ulsan who can afford to sort of bring in more foreign players that got more money than domestic players, and then you're going to have the teams who are just about getting by as they are. They're going to get they're not going to be able to afford to sort of have 5 or 6 foreigners really. So I don't know how I feel about it. I think it might be a necessity. That's all I can say about that one, really. Right then. Well, you already mentioned this, and we've talked about this before, albeit off air. But this new ACL format with the current schedule now, as it is from this season onwards, it means that we're going to have this kind of rushed round of 16, quarters, semis, all in August, I believe, and then the final will be February 2023, just before the new K-League season starts. A good 2 or 3 months after the previous season will have finished. Some players might have left the clubs. Contracts obviously expire in Korea at the end of December. What's all this about? Who or which countries have been influential in making AFC do this, do you think?
I mean, I think first and foremost, because, we are a K-League podcast, and I'm still doing K-League. Yeah, even though I'm all over the place, I'm still doing K-League. This is terrible news for K-League. I think the schedule, as it stands right now, works out really well for K-League teams, where the ACL final is in November, sometimes December. It's late in the year as teams are finishing their run in the season. So the idea of having a final in preseason for K-League teams is awful. Again, it's interesting being here because I was just out for the Thai League home opener yesterday. So the opening weekend for Thai League was yesterday. So they have actually switched schedules, and they're now on the European schedule, which is actually was the logic behind this from AFC, was to switch to get better synchronization with the global transfer windows and to kind of help clubs sign better players, was what they said, and to just align a little bit more with the, I keep putting in quotes, but the bigger leagues, the European leagues out there. And the idea also was to kind of spread out the distribution of club matches over the year a little bit more evenly, especially it won't be a hub next year, so it will be going back to home and away. So instead of just like these small, really intense doses of ACL that we're getting right now with the hubs, it'll be spread out more. And the idea of this calendar is that will help spread it out even further. So that's the idea from the club side. They also did say, as far as national team duties go, switching to this kind of a calendar aligns more with the European calendar. And so then European clubs might be more willing to release their players when it's within these windows. So there's a lot of logic to it. But again, it's a disaster for K-League clubs. It's a big ask to ramp up in February for an ACL final. If Jeonbuk or Daegu were able to get through this year, like you're saying, who knows what their squad's even going to look like in February. If it's Jeonbuk, who we'll get to who you might favor in that matchup, but if it's Jeonbuk, might not even be Kim Sang-shik in charge of the team anymore. There might be a huge turnover in squad. Is Paek Sung-ho still going to be there? It's a lot. It's a lot. So for K-League clubs, but again, I see the reasoning behind it, but I don't necessarily love it. I like things being able to finish within a year. I like the K-League schedule being the opposite of European schedule. I like the ACL schedule being opposite, but everybody wants to be European football. So
yeah, it doesn't really take into account the fact that Korea and Japan and China and Hong Kong, perhaps not so much Hong Kong, but like the teams in the countries in East Asia, it's a harsh winter. You can't. We can't go through a winter here and play football in those kind of temperatures. It's just even if the players were willing to play in minus 10, 15, the pitches wouldn't hold up anyway. So it's just, it's penalizing some of the larger, leagues over this side of Asia just because they haven't got the right weather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Let's move on to the ACL this season. Who do you think are the favorites from the east side of the competition?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly JDT. No, I wish it was JDT. It's hard to look past Yokohama, or it was, I should say. They've kind of stumbled a little bit in the league. They've lost 3 straight in all competitions. They do have home advantage to an extent. Obviously, Yokohama is not too far from Tokyo. Most of these matches we played, Saitama is just outside of Tokyo. So I do like Yokohama. I thought they looked pretty good in the group. They've looked better from what I've seen, the little bit I've seen of them in league play. And Urawa have looked really good of late. Urawa is going to be in their own stadium. They've won 4 out of 5 league games, including one that I was lucky enough to go to, and they beat a Chanathip-less Kawasaki. Rough night for me. I was there for Chanathip. But they only have 1 loss since late May. So, this team, they're doing quite well at the moment. And like I said, I do love JDT, but going into Saitama to face Urawa is a big ask. And I think, again, that's one of the things when you're looking at the way that this is set up. Urawa is in really good form right now, and they are literally playing at home. And they've got all of these matches in about 10 days, I want to say. I think it is. It's Thursday and Friday this week, Monday and Tuesday the following week, and then the semifinal will finish up. I should know this date, but it's all going to be done and dusted really soon. And I think, I think I've got to pick them just because, again, that form and playing at home is just such a huge advantage, especially for them. That crowd will turn up and they'll be loud, and it will be an advantage. So, I think I would have to say Urawa.
Fair enough. Well, in terms of how the 2 K-League teams have got to this stage, Jeonbuk and Daegu, what would you say were the standout performances throughout the course of the group stage for each of those 2 teams?
Yeah, I think for Daegu, it has to be the emergence of Zeka. I still don't. We need to get in touch with him so I can learn how to pronounce his name like you did with Dave Boothhouse.
Yeah.
That was anywhere near. I don't know. Not easy. I think his emergence came through ACL, and I think that was really helpful for Daegu to know that they had that option, especially because Cecina was out at the time. So I think that was absolutely massive for them there. And I think, I can't talk about Urawa without talking about the fact that Daegu went undefeated against them. They beat them once, and then they drew against them. And to me, more than what they did against the kids, more than what they did against Lion City Sailors, or what they didn't do against Lion City Sailors, I think those 2 matches against Urawa showed that on their day, Daegu can keep up with anybody and even beat anybody. And that was why they got out of this group, was those 2 matches, because of all the mechanics and this and that and the other. The matches against last place teams didn't count anyway. So those 2 matches are what won them this group. And I think that those were some really gritty, really impressive performances from Daegu. With Jeonbuk, I would say it's something similar. They managed to go out there and beat Yokohama, and this is a team that they haven't done well against in the past. I think ACL was another one where Moon Sun Min really showed his value to this team. I think he's kind of an undervalued commodity at Jeonbuk, in my opinion, and I think it might be because we all hate that dance, and I do hate that dance. But I just hate it.
I still hate the dance. Still, in case there's any sort of confusion, definitely hate the dance.
Not a fan at all. But what he can do for that team on the pitch, and he pops up in big moments. I think that he's proven that he can do that over the course of his career with Incheon when he was in the military, and now he's with Jeonbuk. I think he had a really good group stage, and again, I think mentally, Jeonbuk kind of proved that they could hold their own against J-League opposition, and really, this comes down to what we're talking about with the roster rules and everything else. To be honest, that's almost where things have to be for K-League clubs right now. So for Daegu and Jeonbuk, I think they've gone a long way to proving that to themselves that they can do that. So those performances were huge for me in the group stage.
Well, we are going to have one team go through to the quarterfinals. That's obviously guaranteed. Do you see any of them going through to the semis and beyond? Which K-League team do you think's got the best chance of reaching the final, or dare I say, going on to win it?
You have to say Jeonbuk, I think, just because they have the experience here. And oddly enough, I think maybe their domestic form being poorer than expected, that gap with Ulsan potentially opening up as Ulsan makes up games. I think maybe that could help Jeonbuk because usually they're cruising in the league and then that kind of becomes a priority. And I think winning the league is still a priority for them, but financially speaking, honestly, it shouldn't be when ACL is still an option. So if you're Jeonbuk, then you've got to look at beating a very out of form Daegu side that they've not done too well against this year in league play, mind you, but it won't be easy. But again, this is a team that's getting a new manager this week and has been in really bad form in the league. If Jeonbuk don't get this done, then I don't think we should be done seeing managers resign, to be entirely honest. If Kim Sang-shik goes home after one game and loses to a new manager or manager-less Daegu FC with the form they're in, bye, buddy. Bye. You got to go at that point. So I think that will kind of galvanize them. And then they've got that name recognition enough for other teams in the region. You know, I think anybody coming up against them knows they're two-time champions in this tournament. They've won the league 37 times in a row, or so it feels for those of us that have been covering it.
I think it's 38, but yeah, you're right.
It is 38 now. How could I forget? Matthew, somewhere in England right now, Bin's head just like pinged up. He's listening. I would say that they would be the ones that have the best chance to go on just because Daegu are a mess right now.
Yeah, it depends. Obviously, as we said, when the draw that takes place on the 20th. So, hoping that they get a good draw. I mean, obviously, at that stage, there aren't going to be too many favourable draws anyway. Whoever does go through will be very, very tough. But yeah, let's just hope for K-League's sake that one of them can extend their stay in ACL. Because, to be perfectly honest with you, Ryan, it's been a bit disappointing for K-League teams in this competition for a couple of years now. I know, obviously, Ulsan won it in 2020, but that was, a rare bright spot, really. It's been disappointing. Suwon Blooming's making it to the semi-finals. Should really have won it that year, if we're honest, in 2018. Yeah. But what have you made? Who are the biggest? Who are the sort of the biggest underperformers, the biggest offenders in terms of underperforming in the Champions League, do you think?
Ironically enough, the 2020 champions. I mean, Ulsan didn't make it out of their group this year.
Yeah.
You can't have that. Ulsan lost to Pohang last year. You can't have that. I mean, especially last year, if we're talking about Al Hilal versus Ulsan, that's a very different match than Al Hilal versus Pohang. Pohang, credit to them. I mean, what a run. But my God, they're so lucky it wasn't worse. That Hilal team was so good last year. And I think Ulsan might have had a better chance in that one. They probably wouldn't have conceded within the first 2 seconds. Or, I mean, honestly, I think it was 12 seconds or something like that.
Yeah.
But if you want to be a big team, if you want to be an elite team, then you've at least got to make it out of your group. And I think that yeah, and I know I always throw Ulsan under the bus, but I want them to be a bigger club. I want them to win these things. And I think the way that they've exited this tournament the past 2 years, it's not been a great look for K-League. I think this year coming into it, obviously they're the best team in world football, but the Jeonnam Dragons being in it this year was always going to be a pretty big ask for K-League clubs to perform at a high level when you got a K2 club would be in relegation trouble in K2 this year if we had such a thing.
Yeah.
So when they're in it, you're looking for them to punch way above their weight to do a lot there. But I think overall, I honestly think it's really concerning times for K-League and ACL in general, because like we were talking about with the calendar shift, that's going to make things more difficult. And the gap between these other leagues is shrinking. The gap with Thai League is shrinking. The gap with the Vietnamese League is shrinking. We've seen what Lion City Sailors are trying to do. I mean, there are a lot of teams in these so-called smaller leagues that I think are going to catch up soon. And I think the J-League clubs are only going to continue to improve. The amount of investment in the league in Japan, it's just leaps and bounds above what K-League is getting right now. And I think K-League clubs are going to have to be really smart with how they approach this tournament. Hopefully they're really smart with those roster changes and everything else we mentioned. But overall, I mean, look at this year. We've got 2 K-League clubs and they're facing each other. So then one of them is going to be the lone shining beacon going into the quarterfinals, not even the semifinals. So, I mean, And would you, I mean, and given the shape that both of these teams are in right now, I don't care who they face in the quarterfinals. Would you favor them in that match? It's hard to say yes, in my opinion. So, 2020 was great. Thank you, Ulsan. I always love it when K-League can extend that lead of the most titles of any league in Asia. Big fan of that. But I have real concerns for K-League and Korean clubs in this tournament.
Do you think that the days are gone now where, or maybe they are about to go, where we sort of think, well, a K-League team, the minimum that they should be achieving is the semi-finals and the final, or going on to win it? Like, are those days numbered now, where the minimum expectation isn't that a K-League team should go on and win the ACL?
To go on and win it, I mean, I think also the West would have a lot to say about that. I think there are a ton of quality teams out West. So winning it, I don't think is going to be, it's certainly not going to be as easy as it was. But I mean, again, I just think when it comes to the two biggest leagues in the East, and obviously I don't mean to disrespect anybody else, but historically speaking, it's K-League and J-League. Nobody's going to get upset about that. I think that J-League is pulling ahead pretty significantly, not just with the amount of investment that they get, but also player development. We talk about this all the time. They're actually looking at this region as a talent development pool. And outside of Aznawi and K-League, what are we doing in Asia? What are K-League clubs doing within Asia to foster that talent? I'm in Bangkok right now, and you could see a J-League train go by. Not right now, but they've done it. When the J-League season kicked off, they had a full train wrapped with the Thai players in J-League. That's the kind of footprint that they're getting throughout this region, whereas K-League just isn't adapting in that way. And so I think the days of expecting a K-League club in the final, even in the semifinals, not unless something changes. I don't mean to be doom and gloom as it's storming outside, but it's concerning times.